afternoon. I think it's a pleasure to be here and discuss the growth of, the roadmap for the growth of the textile sector. So I have a few slides which I would, and then I think I will throw it open for discussion. If you have any queries, next please. Well, you know that, Indian textile industry actually has a very rich, heritage, and I would say a promising future. The only thing is, I believe we have not been able to tap our genuine potential. But the fact that India has one of the largest working force across the globe, and that we claim to have the advantage of demographic dividend. So the sectors like labor-intensive sectors actually assume significance, because unless we are able to deploy our the large workforce in meaningful jobs, probably the so-called demographic dividend may ultimately turn to demographic disaster. And well, you know that India's domestic market, domestic sector of the textile and apparel actually is quite vibrant, and the entire size of the textile and apparel market domestically, I think, is around $184 billion. And we have a dream of taking it to $350 billion or even more by 2030. On export front, I think the sector has not done all that well as what expected, but I think domestically we have a very phenomenal growth, I would say. That India's advantage actually, because it is one of the largest producer of fiber. We have a massive fiber infrastructure. India is number 1 and 2 in either cotton or jute or silk production, and not only natural fiber, in man-made fiber, in the polyester, viscose, nylon, acrylic, it is in top 2 and 3. But in spite of having this massive infrastructure, I think the question that begs and an answer is that why we have not done all that well, See, and the employment potential of this sector is humongous, particularly apparel sector. There's a study, a comparison chart. In fact, it would be interesting to know that only an investment of around 15 crore in plant and machinery generates around 150 crore of annual turnover in apparel industry. And if I include land, investment in land and building, probably it would be around 40 crore or so. So this kind of, and 15 crore of investment in plant and machinery leads to installation of 1,000 machines and employs almost 2,000 people. So the investment to employment ratio is one of the biggest. In fact, there's a comparison, a very interesting comparison of Reliance versus Sahi Export, which is the largest apparel exporter in the country. That investment of $2.2 million leads to employment of only 5 persons in Reliance industry, whereas it employs 1,250 people in Sahi Exports. So if you compare this labor-intensive sector, particularly apparel sector, vis-a-vis an automated, first-generation company, I think it is 250 times employment generation potential. So that is something, very interesting, and that is something which holds the key. Of course, India is the 6th largest exporter of textile and apparel, and even in apparel, I believe we are number 6, behind countries like China and Italy, Germany, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and all. Next, please. India's strength, lies in that we have the presence of the entire value chain, as they say, from farm to from fiber to fashion, farm to fashion rather. The only country that has the entire value chain, I think, is China. And then, of course, like I said, that we have a young workforce. 65% of our population is below the age of 35. Our we have a robust raw material base, and this is coupled with the logistic efficiency. See that our logistic performance index over the years has improved quite a lot, and the reports are that contrary to the earlier claim that logistics, added to some 14%. I mean, the logistics costs wanted to almost 14% of GDP. Now I think it is told that it is somewhere between 7 to 8%. Next, please. See, another thing that I think holds key today to the growth of apparel industry and textile industry as a whole is extreme focus on ESG compliance. This is the age of responsible clothing and ethical sourcing and all that. So the focusing on recycling and traceability and everything. And it would be interesting to know that almost 59% of the textile waste is in India is recycled. 34% as it is, and 25% through yarn. So there is extreme focus on green manufacturing. Of course, you know that our journey towards generation of non-fossil fuel has been phenomenal. In fact, we had a dream of non-fossil fuel contributing to power generation of around 50% by 2030. I think we're already at the level of 47% or so. So solar energy, I mean, power generation has grown significantly. And there are many textile players and apparel in clusters like Tirupur, where I think a significant amount of power consumption is through non-fossil fuel only. Then there's a question of branding, because point is that we have ambitious targets, 40 billion by 30 or 100 billion by 2030 for the entire industry. So you need to improve the brand image of the entire industry. And how do you do that? I think you have to replicate probably Bangladesh example, because so that is through branding. We are trying to create brand India image through events like mega events that we have held recently. But you need to give all kinds of certifications. We have less number of LEED certified factories. So we have tied up with US Business Green Business Council that we have kept a target for ourselves that at least by the end of the year we should have X number of LEED certified factories. Then there are various certifications for organic to see that the value chain it complies with all ESG requirements. So you have certifications like GOTS, Global Organic Textile Standards, OQTAX, and fair trade. Social compliance is necessary. India has maximum number of SA 8,000 factories, which ensures that there's complete social compliance, no forced labor, and all of that. Next, please. So India position the textile trade. Of course. So our market is. The problem here is that in India, the textile export sector is that we have, if I talk about, generally there is a extreme reliance on certain economies like US and European Union. And that is, I think, has harmed the industry quite a lot. And there is an urgent need for market diversification. In fact, in apparel industry, I think 71% of the India's exports are destined to USA, European Union, and UK. USA, of course, remains one of the largest market for India overall in textile terms and even apparel terms. The overall textile, so like I said that we have domestic size of the market is of course I think $147 billion. So total $184 billion is the market of textile and apparel. And I think we have a plan to grow to $300 billion. Of course, this can be through various means, FT engagements to market access. Next, please. So this is the fact. In fact, I would like to discuss more about the strategy rather than the facts, So these are the figures of how this sector has performed over the years. So, next, please. This is country-wise performance of current year compared to last year. In fact, apparel sector, export sector, if we talk of, it is not a story that we can be proud of, because in last 10 years the journey has been roller coaster ride. In fact, I would say the curve, export curve, has almost plateaued or flattened over the years. So there is a lot of introspection required how to take this industry to the next level. Next, please. So what are the challenges? So I'll quickly talk about the challenges, and then probably I'll discuss the strategy that lies there. See, there is a extreme problem of lack of capacity augmentation. We lack the scale. So even if we have orders flowing in from all sides, I think the apparel industry, the textile industry is not in a position to cater to those orders because our size is not growing. The industry is fragmented. We have the presence of entire value chain, but the entire value chain is fragmented. And the weaker elements in the value chain is of course processing is the most weak section, followed by weaving sector. Then there have been initiatives of PLI and PM Mitra, but the takeoff is slow. I'll discuss about that later. Then we have extreme dependence on import for sourcing MMF fabric. The problem with India is that India is essentially a cotton-centric summer export country, apparel export country. And in India, the share of cotton to non-cotton is 60:40, as against the global norm of 30:70. Because the world is moving towards man-made synthetic garments, synthetic fabric and all that. Because that has ready-made use in fashion industry, in formal clothing, in sports. So because of the durability and the versatility of the fiber, but that is where I think lacking. So we had initiative of PLI, but PLI has not taken up the way it should have taken up. I'll discuss about that later. So there is investment gap. We have dependence on imported machinery. We do not have quality machinery manufacturing ecosystem in India. Another problem is poor speed to market. There is a study by Bangladesh that India's speed to the market on an average is 50 days. 63 days as against 50 days for countries like Bangladesh. We had suggested that we should have, at strategic places all over the globe, we should have, something like Bharat Mart or India Mart that we have built in UAE, so that, in fast fashion, where the time is of the extreme essence, if you have to cater to the orders, I think you can have those, we have inventory there, and we can cater to the needs of the individual market through warehouses at those strategic locations. There are labor issues in India. We have labor shortages because there is extreme dependence on migrant labor in some of the urban clusters. We have a high overtime rate. We have limited overtime hours. And productivity is low. India's overtime rates are 150% of the normal wage, as against the ILO norm of 120% or so. In Bangladesh and Vietnam, they give 150%. In Bangladesh, you have an extra working hour of 4 hours overtime, so 8+. So they produce 3 garments per hour. So in a day, they produce 36 garments. India's, in case it is 2.4 garments per hour, so which is 2.4 into 9. And Vietnam, again, productivity is higher, 2.8 or so. So I think it is about time that we introduce technology in our manufacturing. We use AI in fashion forecasting. We can have robotics in that assembly line operations and quality control. We are already using blockchain technology in traceability. Then the problem with this industry is high absenteeism, because, like I said, the workforce is largely dominated by women. So they have their own sets of problems, and attrition also is higher. The wage rate, of course, I think we have wage rate higher than Bangladesh, but I think it is somewhere around that, minimum wage only. So, and then there is a policy, I would say, lack of policy stability, in the sense that, every now and then there are extensions of the schemes for a few months or years. So, because schemes which are completely WTO compatible, I think they should be permanent in nature. And because of the MMF constant, the cotton MMF imbalance like that I talked about, there's a complete lack of sync of India's export basket with the global demand. So you will find that major the top products which are in demand globally are basically MMF, garments, MMF products, whereas India essentially, I said, is cotton centric. In fact, there's a study that in top 15 apparel globally, traded products, I think India has only 5, Bangladesh is around 12, and then Vietnam is 14. Because and we are pretty weak in outerwear and in lowers. We have been doing well in uppers. We have been doing in say t-shirts. We are one of the global leaders in shirts, I think. But in athleisure, outerwear, and lowers, I think and that is because I'll again come to that. See, because of lack of training, we found out that why there's a particular problem in manufacturing outerwear, because our workforce is not skilled enough to manufacture high SAM products. So we have recommended to the ministry that we should have product specific skilling also, so that the products we are in high demand. Why can't the ministry have the product specific skilling introduced, so that it has a relevance? And like I've said you that we had kept a target of ourselves that 40 billion by 2030. Now there's a general estimate that at an average rate of growth, we will have another 200-300 factories of average size set up by 2030, whereas the requirement to achieve the target, though it is not very, ambitious, I would say, would be around 1,200 factories. So the only way I think you can achieve the target is by improving in your unit value realization, which can come only through branding. So we have made a proposal to the ministry that agencies like AEPC should be allowed to have a collaboration with IBEF. Then a lot of other sessions we have said that how do we improve our branding? We can have a India pavilion in every fair. We can use social media for publicity in every airport. We should have a lot of a host of suggestions we have given. We have also suggested that how some of the major Indian brands can go global, and that is what we should focus. Because particularly in Apparel, if you find, the delta is very huge. The product at which you export for the big brands and the ultimate purchase price of the product in the user market is sometimes 6x, 7x, 8x. So if you go for branding, if you build a brand, I think the sky is the limit. And then of course you have tariff and non-tariff barriers and all that. Next, please. So schemes and initiatives that has been introduced by the government, of course, is PLI and PM Mitra and employment-linked incentive schemes and SAMR. But there are issues. See, the PLI scheme which it was introduced, it did not, there was a lukewarm response from industry. And the reason was not very hard to find, because the PLI scheme, essentially, the apparel sector found to its dismay, it was essentially not designed for the apparel sector, because the threshold limit, the investment threshold limit was pretty high, 100 crore and 300 crore. So, and you know that the apparel sector is largely dominated by MSMEs. So we had taken up with the government that introduced PLI 2.0, which was that introduced PLI for garments irrespective of the fiber. That was recommended by the line ministry, but ultimately did not find favor with the government. Alternatively, we had suggested that PLI 1.0 can be tweaked, because the PLI 1.0 had a lot of, one is that investment limit could easily be brought down. That's one. Another requirement was that year-on-year growth you have to achieve is 25%, which was quite impractical and not aligned with the norms of the industry. So that recently they have done. They have brought down from 25 to 10%. They have brought down the investment threshold limit from 100 to 50, though I think it is half done, because we were expecting it. We had requested for bringing it down to 25 crore. Then the product basket, which was eligible for meeting the criteria, had to be expanded, which they have done partially. So there were other suggestions. So PLI has largely been tweaked. PM Mitra, it was a major initiative, because many of the top global brands, they want that the unit should be vertically integrated, that you should not have reliance on import for anything. So you are manufacturing from yarn, fabric, fiber, everything. So PM Mitra was such that where you will have all activities of the textile value chain within the PM Mitra itself. It will bring down the logistics cost, and it will vertically integrate the entire textile value chain. And there are 7 PM Mitra parks which have earmarked. I think 2 are brownfields, the rest 5 are greenfields. We would like PM Mitra parks to be expedited a bit. there has been substantial progress in two PM Mitra Park. One is Virudnagar at Tamil Nadu, where I think the land has already been allotted and auction is there, and again in Dhar in Madhya Pradesh. And of course, you have one in the brownfields are in Warangal and another in Maharashtra. So there are, I think that there is some movement. We want PM Mitra Park to be, the PM Mitra Park will be state of the art. It will be completely sustainable, completely ESG compliant. All of that, is being ensured. But I think the problem is that time is running fast and we want things to be expedited with. So our request was that by the time PM PLI and PM Mitra Park genuinely takes off, why can't we request the major fiber players, the mega industries, to invest down in the downstream activity, so that because capacity augmentation, and then of course we had suggested that you can go for JV, you can invite investment from abroad and all of that, and then Samarthya scheme is essentially for training of people. That's the Samarthya scheme. The major departure was that the dependence was not on the training institutes, but it was given to the industry to train the people and ensure that they get meaningful employment. Next, please. So, what are the strategies that we have? We can talk of capacity augmentation, as I told you. So, easing PLI norm and encouraging. So, that is something partially it has been done. Fast tracking PM Mitra implementation. That is, I think, the government is cognizant of that fact and working on that. Interest equalization scheme, like I was talking about, the stability of the schemes, is in the question. That interest rates in countries like China is 3%. In Vietnam, it is 4.5%. In Malaysia, it is 3.1%. Here, even if you operate through what you call mutual credit guarantee scheme, which are essentially designed for collateral, some kind of a 60% was government guarantee. If you operate in those schemes, the bankers lend you at 11 to 12%. Whereas if you go through some good collateral, the loan is offered at 9%. So that essentially, I would say, spoils the entire purpose of the scheme. But of course, recently government, I think, has responded. Now we have another, credit guarantee scheme exclusively for exporters for additional working loan. It should work. Interest equalization scheme was one of the backbones, because India's the cost of capital is very high. This scheme was expired in December last, so we want it to be revived. I think industry now this will be a part of the export promotion mission, we are told. So that should come sooner rather than later, because the interest equalization scheme actually will be a part of the export promotion mission, which was announced last year. The final allocation, of course, has been done recently. You would have seen. So that will be addressed. Then we wanted policy continuity in schemes like Rostel and all that. Now, schemes like Rostel is completely WTO compliant. So there is no point in giving piecemeal, extensions. Then we are also talking about market diversification fund. It should be created so that we should explore markets like Russia, where there is good demand, some $7 billion US. Then Mexico, then Saudi Arabia. We have identified and these issues, lying in some market diversification creation we're talking about. FTAs, will be very crucial actually for sectors like textile and apparel, because like I told you, in European Union and UK, these two countries, they account for almost 37% of India's exports, and we have a tariff disadvantage of 9.6% on average. Now, the point is that we are competing with players like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Turkey, and Cambodia. Bangladesh and Cambodia, they're LDCs, they have zero duty access in the European Union and in UK. Then you have Vietnam, they had an FTA already with the EU. And then you have Turkey, they also enjoy duty-free access. So competing with them on cost basis becomes very difficult. So, but once this UK and EU FTA get actually operationalized, the tariff disadvantage that we had, so we'll get a kind of level playing field, and if Bangladesh loses that LDC status by shortly, then probably the tables might be turned. Next, please. So, like I said, skill development strategy, I think our development schemes have not really done all that well. But yes, there's a need for reform in labor laws. So we need to align our overtime payment with the ILO norms, and of course allow extra hours to work. This is another thing which I wanted to highlight was that because the immediate capacity augmentation does not look to be look visible in the near future, we had suggested that like all other industries, why can't apparel industry have more than one shift? They can have two shifts. When we try to dive deep, we realize that because this sector is largely dominated by women workforce, and there is a Indian Factory Act, some I think section 66 or 67, which prohibits women from working in the night time. And this provision of Factory Act has been held unconstitutional by Madras High Court way back in 90s only. But things haven't changed. That law has not been scrapped. So what has happened is some of the states, they have brought their own laws basically to allow women to work in factories at night time. UP has done it. Andhra has done it. I think Himachal has done it. So we have written to ministry that they should ask other states also to do that. Some of the states have brought that change, but they have brought the change only in Shop and Establishment Act, where they can work, shopping malls and all that. But you want that women to be allowed to work in factories during night period, so that if double shifts start taking place, your existing capacity automatically gets doubled, and then you are positioned to cater to the additional requirements from the foreign buyer. Then of course machinery, we have said that our recommendation was that on all textile machineries, particularly where high-end machinery, the duty should be brought down to zero for a couple of years or maybe 3 years, and then probably so that you can import high-end machinery, and it could lead to your technology upgradation, and then maybe after 2-3 years you can raise a higher tariff for, so that you will have tariff-linked investment in the country for manufacture of machinery. Then, of course, flexibility in raw material import. Like I told you earlier, that actually our problem is in weaving sector, particularly in MMF. And the regions, I think there are many regions which are, one of the regions that like you would have seen was QCO, which has recently been removed. So our MMF fabric segment is not strong enough. You have a PLI in that, but then some of the quality fabric we do not manufacture in synthetic segment. So we have a critical dependence on import for those items. And there we operate through something called a special advanced license scheme. But that scheme is a little cumbersome. You have to have one-to-one accounting. There are many issues, which nag exporters and prevent ease of doing business. So we had suggested a very flexible scheme so that, you get items on your self-declared now. You don't have to do one-to-one accounting. Of course, you will not be diverting the imported material to the domestic market, but then you will have you don't have to do inch by inch and square meter by square accounting, and duty payment and all the hassles. Of course, there is a consumption register, utilize a consumption register. So on a RMS basis, risk-based management we can do, and the entire material imported can actually be accounted for. But one-to-one accounting should be avoided. So that scheme actually is on the anvil. We very shortly, I think we should have it, operationalized, because DOC and Department of Revenue, they are in talks with this, each other. Next, please. We had also seen that some of these players, particularly in the apparel sector, they carry with them the past of the quota regime. So they have made enough and more money, but then now that the profit margin, of course, in the apparel sector has dwindled over the years, so they prefer investing and earning into some other businesses like real estate and all that. So the suggestion was that to make them invest the profit into the the same industry, to plow back the profit into this, some kind of tax incentive should be given. Then there was something called capital subsidy. There was a scheme called ATUFs, Technology Upgradation Fund scheme, that expired in 2022, and there is no replacement in place. Now, PLI, we said that micro units may not be able to avail PLI because they still have the relatively high threshold. So some substitute of ATUFs should be introduced at least for micro units. Then there is another scheme, there was another scheme introduced by the government under Section 115 BAB of the Income Tax Act. That was that for new units which are established, registered up to a particular time, and then they start manufacturing, they get lower corporate tax of 15% as against the average 25%. That scheme was there. Existing scheme was that if you are able to register your company before 2019 and are able to manufacture by 2024, I believe, then you will have this benefit. So we are only requesting that the same scheme should be extended further so that there will be incentive for new investments. ESG compliance, as you know, this is something I think we have been working upon. We are kind of engaging with all the ESG players like IDH and Reverse Resources and Green Story and Center for Responsible Business, because I believe ESG compliance is now a business imperative, and it improves your branding. So it should not be. We are trying to drive home the fact to the industry, to MSMEs particularly, that ESG compliance should not be viewed as a compliance burden. And we have set up sustainability clinics in the clusters. We have in some of the factories, those ESG dashboards have been installed to monitor the level of decarbonization the unit has entered into. And we have also suggested something called Green Transformation Fund, a scheme akin to Bangladesh, because you create a corpus and then you provide soft loan for procurement, domestic procurement or import of ESG infrastructure, ESG capital goods. Now, there are two ways you can do that. Either the entire kitty itself will finance that entire loan, or you can basically do some kind of a interest subvention through this kitty. That is, I think, Ministry has left up this idea. So maybe we will find something in the budget announcement on this. Next, please. I think that's it. I think I just randomly spoke something. If there is any pointed questions, I would love to answer those.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Mithileshwar Thakur. It was a very in-depth presentation of the problems in the industry. The last slide perhaps summarizes the interventions required, which I request on the meeting on 27th. You may like to highlight this slide at the end because people not connected with the industry will also be participating as part of recommendations to the government. Just one or two points. You talked of export being re-exported without much difficulty. Should we form special economic zones in PM Mitra bugs so that all these benefits come to the apparel industry to use the imported material back without too much of accounting? That is one. Then you talked about the PLI not doing very well in man-made fibers. It's not clear what are the exact problems. A small note will help in that. If you can elaborate, so we'll put it in our recommendations.
Can I respond or maybe later?
Okay.
PLI had 2-3 problems. PLI had that investment threshold was pretty high. It was 100 crores. PLI was introduced for MMF fabric, MMF apparel, and technical textile. It was not suited for fabric and apparel sector for the simple reason that investment threshold was very high. Not many people invested. Some 63, 64 people only participated.
Okay.
Now, after a lot of persuasion, the government has revised those PLI norms. Another criteria which was laid down was that unless you achieve year-on-year growth of 25%, you will not be eligible for that incentive of PLI. Now, that was very impractical because I think no industry, in this sector is having, growth of 25%. So we said we align with the industry now Now they have brought down that requirement to 10% growth. Then there was request for expansion of product basket. There was also request that the value addition, from fabric to garment should be brought down to 40% rather than 60% stipulated. So those, I think part of those changes have already been incorporated. So I hope that it takes off. Another thing that I forgot to mention was that yes, e-commerce holds a lot of potential for enhancing exports from sectors like apparel and gems and jewelry and all that. So I can discuss about that later, when we meet on 27th, because there are certain inherent flaws. I think Ajay is aware. So that e-commerce policy also needs to be, some pragmatism needs to be, built into that e-commerce policy, so that the players are able to take fullest advantage of.
I think Mr. Thakur could add these points in the final 2 slides.
And we'll do that. In fact, it was hurriedly made yesterday. I'll do that.
Just 2 points you can add. And then certainly the machinery support is necessary. You see, the main issue is textile is not only linked to 45 lakh workers, but also 15 lakh farmer families, agricultural families are dependent on silk, cotton, jute and all that. So if any sector requires support, I think it is the textile sector. We can support all the issues. You talked of low productivity. Is it dependent on advanced machinery being introduced or scale of manufacture? It is also said that our response time is higher than Bangladesh. Order to fulfillment.
See, the skilling actually India has not done, I mean, it would not be an exaggeration if I said the skilling schemes have failed in India, because our workers are not skilled enough, not even in that basic industrial engineering sense. Now, of course, industry now they have taken upon themselves to train them, so it is working fine, but it will take time. One is skill level. Second is, I think, the element of industry 4.0 technology has to be brought in. You can bring in robotics. You cannot work on archaic principles. That is another one. Then you depend on the migrant laborers. And now the call is that rather than workers moving to factory, the factories need to move to workers. So now you find that the state governments are coming up with wonderful textile policies, particularly Madhya Pradesh and Orissa. They have the best textile policies, and these are labor surplus states. So if you work in your hometown with that not much of wage, I think your productivity will automatically go up. A migrant labor's delivery of because living a city life with all kinds of constraints with that bigger amount, I think is not the best thing to happen, and that's why you find a lot of attrition. So in fact, in PM Mitra Awag, we had given a suggestion. What happens is that if you have Apple units side by side, there's a lot of movement of laborers from one factory to the other. I mean, they call it poaching and all that. So in PM Mitra Park, we had suggested that it should be essentially up to fabric stage and introduce hub and the spoke model. So hub should be up to fabric, and then you will have 4 or 5 spokes, within the range or within a radius of some 50 kilometers to avoid that attrition and movement and all that, and the number of workforce that the kind of workforce that you require. So migrant labor is, in fact, to retain migrant labor, because what happens, being summer-centric country, you have particular season where you're productive. I mean, you have to cater to those orders, and that fortunately, unfortunately, coincides with the festival time of most of the migrant workers. So they go home. So during peak hours, you find that there is extreme shortage of laborers. So we had mooted a scheme that the government should incentivize, besides industry giving, wage to workers for those 6 months, government should also pitch in to basically induce them to stay in the urban clusters. But then the best thing was that the factories would move to labor surplus states so that those states benefit, there is inclusive growth, the productivity level goes high, and they take advantage of the the wonderful textile policies that many of the states are competing to bring in.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Of course, we'll have the benefit of interaction on 27th also. So this has given a lot of inputs for us to understand the problems of the industry. There is no two opinion that textile has to be supported by the government. When you are giving free income support to all the ladies at certain level and all in every election, I think textile industry deserves the maximum support, we feel. So we'll meet on 27th. If you could just add some points what you brought out
We'll do that.
in the final slide, it'll help me in making the recommendation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sparing your time.
Thank you.
So we'll move over to the steel discussions.